Looks like we're live. Nice to see everybody here. Nice to see our faces, Alex Tuck, Amy Marshall-Carney, Pete Walker, and myself at Tuck Consulting. Here today to talk about best practices and strategies for prioritizing projects, operations, and general priorities for any business, small business, or nonprofits. Wanted to start off with some introductions. For myself, I'm Alex Morgan. I'm the professional services lead at Tuck, working with Alex Tuck, of course, here. I lead our professional services practice, mostly in the IT side, but other professional services in various channels, healthcare, and the like. I'm also a project manager, and I work closely with some of our partners at ClickUp and other software. So I have plenty of experience in the field, but I will just be moderating the three experts we have here today. Alex Tuck, obviously I wanted you to introduce yourself, but just to give you a quick spiel, the founder and principal of Tuck Consulting Group, and recognized by Inc. and Forbes as one of the fastest growing firms in the country, and founder of a nonprofit, People Helping People Global. Welcome today.
Thank you. My name's Alex Tuck, and I run Tuck Consulting Group. I'm founder. I started about 11 years ago. We're a team of project management consultants, about 60 plus consultants distributed all across the US. And we specialize in delivering services to small businesses and nonprofits in the healthcare, IT professional services, and SaaS verticals. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Thanks for being here, of course. All right, next, Amy Marshall-Carney. Nice to see you again. Small business owner, experienced program and project manager across a variety of industries, CPG, agriculture, information technology, nonprofit healthcare, and a senior leader at firms like Pure Green Mountain in the past. Pleasure to have you here, Amy, and let's learn a little more about you. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex and Alex. Looking forward to the discussion today. So, as you said, I've had some wide variety of experiences across different industries, primarily in the program management, project management space, done some leadership work. Looking forward to discussing today's topic. So I think that's it for now.
Wonderful. Short and sweet. Thanks, Amy. And last but not least, Pete, I love the background, actually. Pete, nice to see you. Principal consultant and founder of Navigate & Co. You're an experienced operational and digital transformational leader, specializing in process optimization for Fortune 500 and high-growth small businesses. Nice to have a kind of a mix here, but I want to hear more about your experience, Pete, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Yeah, thank you guys for all having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. Like I said, my focus is at this point in time from traditional management consulting is really on transformations for clients, both starting at the process and then moving into the digital level for them. So it's rooted in a Six Sigma background and taking process waste and lean principles for clients to just help them grow and achieve goals. So this should be a great discussion.
Wonderful. Well, nice to see all four of us here rather, and just to try to recognize our experience as consultants, as project and program managers in the past. Obviously, two different kinds of main tracks between small businesses and nonprofits, which are our kind of core bread and butter at Tuck, but various experience at enterprise level and larger firms. Obviously, a lot of the things that we'll talk about today might apply universally to various size firms, but we're focusing on really the unique issues affecting small businesses and nonprofits. So where there are things that are more applicable from a higher level that could trickle down, or things that are more specific to smaller firms, it's nice to identify what those are and really serve those different needs. So I want to confirm our topic, or rather kind of delineate a little bit. We're talking today about how small businesses determine their priorities and really how best to do so in nonprofits. And I wanted to start by defining them. So as a project management consultancy, we're at Tuck, obviously projects and program prioritization are essential for how we do business. And there are many strategies that would apply to various level firms. So broader strategic initiatives could be prioritized, projects can be prioritized, maybe just one person as a CEO or a founder, your day-to-day tasks can be prioritized in different ways, and there are strategies that would apply to all of those. But let's kind of define what we're going to be discussing today. What do you think about when you talk about prioritizing for a small business or a nonprofit? What are the focus areas of our discussion, and really what are the key things, the key kind of areas or spheres of prioritization we want to discuss? Let's start with you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think, every single company has these like big goals, right? Especially when you're talking about small businesses and nonprofits. You have these big goals that you set. Maybe your core team gets together and does their strategic planning every single year, and then things sort of get shelved, right? You don't really actually do the work. And so here at Tuck, we take all of our prioritization really seriously. And so we think about our big goals, our 5-year goals, 1-year goals, and then we break those down into quarterly goals, right? And so that's what I think about when I think about prioritization, is like, what are our 5 to 7 big things that we're going to focus on as a company, and then like let's even put those in order and make sure that we put resources to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thinking kind of broader level things like OKRs, that's kind of a larger way to structure prioritization. And project management as a whole is, in a sense, prioritization of tasks and many other things. So maybe Amy, your experience at departmental level and various leadership levels, and as a project manager in the past, what are some of the kind of focus areas you would consider and keys for prioritization for a small business or nonprofit?
Yeah, building on what Alex had just said, kind of organizing those plans in the beginning, which is really important. Coming to mind more recently, I had a client that was in the healthcare industry space, nonprofit, and very typical. Again, you mentioned relativity across different sizes of organization. This organization, is medium size, small, medium size, and saw quite a few of the standard pieces, right? So around there's concerns that are being communicated at all levels, staff levels, department levels, whether leaders or work level. There's also kind of some acknowledgement about lack of performance aligning with the plans. And or to the point that Alex made earlier around, hey, we had all these great goals, but yet they might sit on the shelf or they didn't get monitored throughout. So really kind of diving into the data around that. So anecdotal information then gets translated into, hey, are we seeing the anticipated outcomes that we wanted? If not, holding the teams, the leadership, the staff accountable to, one, having those conversations and really being real about, this means that we're translating our understanding from, key stakeholders may need to know that time equals money. Therefore, if we're not spending time appropriately, it's going to have an impact on not only money, but your overall goals. So if you have like satisfactory goals, my staff doesn't want to be frustrated all the time. That's really important. It's not necessarily ultimately monetarily outcome, but it's a really important cultural outcome. And those need to be monitored as well. And so I see that in that particular example, as well as other organizations. And then there's also another benefit that I've seen is that when you start to ask as a leadership team or even work teams questions about how are we doing, what should we be doing better, you start to learn things. And so what's really powerful is when you get those operational leaders or executive leaders recognizing that, oh, I play a role here. How am I doing in that role? Am I influencing the right types of conversations, the right types of decisions? That there's also, am I removing barriers to my team's progress? Am I even asking those questions? And then ultimately continuing to foster a culture of process improvement, right? So Pete mentioned earlier, that's an integral piece of this whole landscape. And it's, if you can really get comfortable with, I find that ask the question, hey, we didn't hit the mark. Well, what do we do about it? What needs to happen? How quickly do we need to navigate? And then I think the last point I'll make on this particular question is around discipline. So following the process that you lay out, sometimes people don't want to do that because like, oh gosh, we're going through that same report again or that same discussion again. But really the importance becomes if you follow that process, it helps you gain some ground on that improvement and continues to enrich the culture or the questioning and the comfort level with, hey, we missed, what do we need to do about it kind of thing. So I'd use the term kind of value in the process discipline. It's really important as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thanks, Amy. That's great news. Great information. I definitely want to touch back on the going from anecdotal to collecting data. That'd be key. Obviously, process improvement as a whole is something to prioritize in a sense, but kind of getting meta of this topic, analyzing your own ability to prioritize work, or rather addressing that as key and really kind of the core of what we're discussing. So Pete, obviously you have a little more experience in kind of enterprise level initiatives, but across various levels. So interested to hear some of the things that you might think about that are a little different from what we just discussed in terms of focusing on this topic.
Yeah, and I think the ideas that both Alex and Amy have laid out are spot on in what I see, at least in successful organizations. I think the one piece that I would add is those organizations that add a structure to helping their prioritization, right? Whether they do it in an application like ClickUp or a spreadsheet or something where they can agree as a leadership team of these are the criteria with which we're going to measure these initiatives against, right? So how do we prioritize? And all this stuff comes into a bucket. They're competing across a variety of different organizations, so maybe a variety of different things. Coming to a set of criteria that everybody can agree to, this is how we're going to rank these things is a good way to do it, because not everything, I will say too, not everything comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, Amy had mentioned a great point on the cultural benefits. Sometimes when you're in highly regulated industries like insurance or healthcare or those kinds of things, you get unfunded mandates. That's what I call them. You don't have a choice. You have to go do some level of initiative. I think the other thing that it allows organizations to do in their piece is to take that fuzzy thing, which is a vision or an initiative, and really scale it into a project, right? A lot of times things don't get done because they're great ideas, but people don't know how to translate those into tangible working components with an actual goal and an expected outcome. So moving it from the fuzzy vision along a set of prioritization criteria to a tangible project that has a start and end. Organizations that can do that can build that structure and have that discipline, I think I've seen have been most successful.
Yeah, that's true. That's another great point. I'm thinking you both kind of harked on this the point of not necessarily just the dollars and cents, but priorities can be revenue driving or they can be more qualitative. And then getting to this question of not what are your priorities, that's kind of outside or rather too specific for us, but recognizing that there can be various types, and you can equally prioritize something like employee wellness or environmental impact. Recognizing that as a similar piece, it might be done a little differently, but important to include that here. I want to just give a quick shout out to all of any viewers or attendees today, or people watching, on the recording after the fact. But Erica Statley, thanks for jumping in the comments. Anyone else want to feel free to chime in where you're tuning in from, or if you have questions for our panel for the end of this discussion, we'll certainly try to approach them then. I want to start talking about maybe something a little more concrete, or rather get into the more concrete examples. And with our various backgrounds here, obviously we've seen lots of success stories, lots of struggles in our experience, and I would love to hear some of those, kind of bridging the gap from the abstract to what are some things that we've seen done right or done poorly. So at various stages, let's focus on small business and nonprofits, but if there are things that are applicable from larger firms, of course, that's definitely relevant for us. So what do you all think that some of these success stories of well-managed organizations that are prioritizing things effectively, what are they doing right? Or what are some of the common themes you've seen among nonprofits and small businesses that fail to prioritize effectively? Just kind of start off that way. Pete, how about you first?
Yeah, I think in some of the firms that I've seen that are in a sort of what I would call the early chaos stages of growth, one of the things that they're most successful with and they do well is understand how much they can actually get done. Because I think they're inundated from a founders and growth syndrome. And so some organizations try to do too much. We've got all these things going on with our growth. We know we need to do these various projects / initiatives, and they try to take on too much and wonder why they fail because they haven't allocated resources correctly to it or been honest enough with themselves with the bandwidth that's necessary as far as timing of other things that have to be done. So I think for me, the short piece is understanding your capacity and how much can you do, right? And knowing that, hey, if we have to do multiple things and get that together, that maybe we need some help.
Yeah, I love that. Capacity is obviously a huge one, and starting off from that, for small businesses, that's probably a very common situation where the founder or the CEO, obviously they've put in their blood, sweat, and tears to get things started up. And then after that, the people you work with can be motivated, to different amounts. Nonprofits, kind of a similar boat. So interesting. Maybe Amy, you have any insight on that from either of those sides of things, whether failures or common themes among the ones that are struggling, or things that you've noticed among clients that are really excelling at this?
Yeah, thanks. And to add on to what Pete was just saying, I do agree. So understanding what capability and capacity you have is really important. Proactively is really cool too. So if you line up your strategic initiative and prioritization activities with your annualized resource planning, that really seems to be a success measure. Also being very comfortable saying no. And so lots of organizations, right? They have functions, they have teams, they have departments, and everyone needs to get stuff done. I'm also recognizing, I think there's a comment here that relates a little bit to those smaller, less glamorous projects, which I think this ties into what I'm going to say next, which is building in on the team level resource planning, a percentage of a time within your own sphere of control. For example, 3% of a team's time has internal capacity to just focus on internal process improvement work, so that you're planning that in. And then any unplanned activities, which means, hey, we don't really know what those priorities are for the year, and you may not be able to have those internal capabilities available to you. You can add those on later if so the organization deems important. But underscoring being comfortable saying no, not now, and maybe later, and really scrutinizing the value propositions, and coming a little bit back to our earlier discussion around that can mean environmental implications, cultural implications, dollarization, whatever is identified as the value prop for the organization, looking through that lens when making the yes/no decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll certainly talk about being able to say no, and just kind of tying this back from the broader to the smaller scope, something like an agile approach. Your product backlog. There are many things that you would love to do, but they can be very, very low on the list. Sometimes that's a no, sometimes that's a maybe later. Obviously, Alex, you as a both founder and of a small business and a nonprofit have pretty relevant experience in these realms. So what are some things, maybe you can talk about what we've done well, or what Tuck has done well, or struggle with, but from your experience both on both sides of the coin, what do you find as some common themes?
We don't have enough hours to talk about what we've struggled with, but no, I think Amy and Pete, you hit it on the head. And I think, sometimes people can get really rough around the axle about trying to think about prioritization and planning and talking about resource loading and all these things. And I think that's what's sort of fun about working with small businesses and nonprofits is you don't need to make it that complex, right? At the end of the day, it's really about understanding what the most important things are to helping you achieve your mission, putting those in order, and allocating resources to those activities. I will say I wanted to talk about nonprofits specifically. Amy was alluding to this a little bit. Every single nonprofit that we work with, where we see them successfully executing on their mission on a consistent basis, does one thing and one thing well. It's that they have a strategic plan, and then they actually project manage every single piece of that strategic plan, which includes assigning owners to each of those buckets of work, breaking down those buckets of work into tasks that can be achieved with goal dates, and then working that project plan to completion. And I think we've worked with 40 or so nonprofits in the past couple of years that are loading this stuff into ClickUp, and the ones that actually do the things and complete things in the timeframes that they have are the successful ones, and the ones that struggle a little bit with retention, with employee satisfaction, with all those things, they're the ones that don't track their work or treat those project plans as sort of the northern light for everyone. So.
Yeah, maybe this is actually just a Trojan horse for us to discuss why it's so important to project manage effectively, because prioritization is effective, just broader scale. I think we want to talk about some of the various inputs and things that you would see, really, more specifically, what are the things you would want to prioritize, or how you would organize the various priorities. But let's talk about some maybe some examples or recommendations and strategies that we've seen successful in the past. So Amy, obviously, we just discussed in your case, but how would you approach something like a client that you've seen? We've come into clients as consultants. Maybe an independent consultant is a different boat where you're really taking on as much as you can, and then learning how to winnow things away. But for most of our clients, they're a little more established. We might enter an organization with very little context of how they're working and quickly find out, hey, this is not structurally very effective. We see symptoms of poor organizational planning or poor prioritization and lots of things like that. So as someone who's been in this change management or management consulting space much before, what would you kind of do first? How would you determine what are the key issues you would deal with and how you might approach those with leadership or with whoever's a decision maker?
Sure. My preferred approach is to observe. So spend, limited but, in-depth time observing not only the decision-making meetings, if they exist. If they don't exist, well, that's obviously the one gap we'll identify quickly, but also the work level and even sometimes board level. So really trying to get that linear connection between the different cadences of decision-making arenas and work level planning arenas. That helps me at least start to see, is information flowing the way it should be, up and down? So if the work isn't being performed at the rate in which it needs to be performed to meet the overall objectives that may be reviewed on a quarterly basis or a semi-annually basis, that's usually where I like to start first, to start to see mechanics, right? Like, is information going up and down? Do they understand what their priorities are? Are they changing? Are they being communicated to at the same pace in which they change? That kind of thing. That usually gives a fair bit of good foundation to say, okay, so we've got a structural issue, a business process issue, maybe not. Then getting into also assessing the key roles in those processes. Are they playing the roles they should be playing? Active, not active? Are they saying no when they need to say no? Are they saying yes when they need to say yes? Are they have their, is everything lined up? So I kind of do a diagnostic look is what I'd recommend, and observe. And then come back and really solicit feedback from the stakeholders to make sure that, are they feeling, what are they feeling, excuse me, and then maybe what recommendations do they see? Because you can't really assess everything just by walking in and watching meetings and things of that nature, but they see things more acutely on their day-to-day, maybe behind the scenes. As a consultant, as you all know, right, we come in and they only tell us what we want to hear kind of thing, unless you're really pro. So it's really also getting that feedback from the actual folks performing the work all the time, making the decisions all the time. Those would be kind of my two get in, get out, kind of start to build out a plan for that. And then help them prioritize based on what I see, what is the most critical pieces that get you the most value? So what are the biggest levers that they can pull there?
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's obviously some degree of triage necessary, I think, as a consultant or any client, where you can't solve all the problems at once, and especially in an organization where prioritization isn't as paramount as it might seem like it should be. We can at least help to prioritize things in our own role there, and then maybe determine there's a broader discussion to be had. Pete, do you have any insight into that? Maybe how you would approach something like that from enterprise, or not from an enterprise level, but some of those lessons that might trickle down?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to where Amy was saying, I adopt all those same principles. There's a couple of other areas that I tend to focus on where I've been able to take those and add to these to have success. Some of when you're coming into an organization and you're looking at the projects and you're trying to help prioritize, how is the flow of communication? So if you've taken that vision and you've translated it to a project, do the people that are the individual stakeholders, maybe the working group level, really understand what the outcomes are going to be? Do they have the known information and communication from leadership or wherever the project was initiated on what this is really supposed to be doing? Or did that message get mixed up and they're thinking it's one thing and the executive sponsors are thinking something else, and you don't really drive to a good solution? The other thing, and it goes a little bit to where Alex and Amy were talking about earlier about being able to say no or put a project on a shelf, The other thing, it's okay to stop a project, right? Your business goals can change. It's not a failure just to say, hey, this is no longer where the business is heading. We've now discovered things as a result of doing this initiative or doing this project that maybe we didn't realize before, and this doesn't make sense. So that you have an out or a pivot. So those kinds of things I like to make sure that are there. The top, the full end-to-end communication, that everybody knows that they're in the same boat going in the same direction, and that there's got to be a handle that you can pull to stop the train, right? Projects don't always need to continue, and so what does that do to the rest of your prioritization and your backlog and all that fun stuff? But you don't have to finish every project.
Yeah, I love that. That dovetails well with the saying no. Thinking about that question, you can say no up front, you can say no in the middle. There's many times where you can stop something. So both of you touched on something else. I think it gets to our next part of the topic. We have about 5 minutes left, but want to touch on this really more specifically, the inputs and the concrete things that organizations need to know to effectively prioritize their work. So you just both discussed effective communication and, in a sense, transparency, so that everyone is aware of either the priorities themselves or how those priorities are determined. And then to some degree, autonomy. I think that might roll into play here. If you communicate your goals and your priorities, then people can work autonomously and not realize that they're rowing in the right direction with everyone else. So Alex, your experience here, you can be concrete or more abstract. We've obviously done this together, but how would you recommend or find tools for a business to prioritize effectively, or how should they clearly define their problems and start solving them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is to have some way to collect inputs, right? So whether it's like a project form that goes to a large PMO, or in the case of, like our small internal team, it goes on the ideas for next quarter's OKRs, right? And, our team gets together, I'm explaining to you, Alex, but I'm explaining to everyone. Our team gets together. There's 5 core team members that are part of our operations team. And we decide as a group what are our 5 to 7 objectives that we're going to tackle out of all of the things that we have. And we sort of have the benefit of being this small team, but the same can be applied at a larger level. And you can leverage tools. There are a bunch out there. We use ClickUp to track everything and then prioritize them. And then, there's other tools like Amy, one of our clients right now is using AHA, and there's another product, Sterline. I don't know if Molly's on the live session, but her Ecolocity, you should check them out. Sterline does a really cool process for being able to prioritize all the different things in the backlog. But there's a ton of tools on the market to help you with this. But even if you're a small team, it's just all about like putting them in order, voting on it together, and then picking your top small amount of things that you're going to really focus on.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're talking about really prioritization, something along the lines of which initiatives should we be tackling first, whether it's projects or whether it's departmental wide initiatives. And along those same lines, should we be doing this at all? When do we say no? How do we say no or yes? Erica in the chat asked a question about kind of along these lines. How do you ensure that smaller or less glamorous projects don't get overlooked? Those are all kind of into the same ultimate question of what are some of the keys of what needs to be prioritized? What are some other considerations if it's not just dollars? You're able to pull in other things like that. So do you have any shorthand tips for kind of how best to say no, or how to force yourself to say yes in a certain case?
I can chime in if that's helpful. So I would say, simplifying value, what is valuable and what's feasible and risk. So those are typically the 2 primary criterion in which businesses, small businesses, medium, large, leverage or start to do the decision-making process. So value can come in the form of, typically it comes in the form of, hey, we are going to generate X revenue, or we are going to improve a customer experience or employee experience or environmental impact. And then the feasibility and risk side of it is, well, how much is it going to cost us, either in dollars or in, extension of resources to actually execute? And then how complex is it? How many people are we impacting? Are we navigating into a space where we have no idea what we're doing? And those two kind of create an axis that help inform on, if you can give some quantifiable, sometimes people translate it into a 1 to 5 scale or a 1 to 10 scale, and use that per initiative, per project, per process improvement, however you want to stack them. That starts to help you hone your list a little bit to say, oh, this thing's really worth a lot of value to us. I also would argue that there might be a good way to divide out your portfolio. So sometimes you don't want to have an environmentally impactful initiative compete against a revenue impactful initiative, right? But your organizational leaders would say, we want to have, value generated in the space of environmental, value generated in the space of customers, and value generated in the space of revenue. Divide up your time, divide up your dollars, and then make some decisions within those kind of quadrants. And I think there's one question here in addition to that process improvement, which I hope that helps, but there's also this tiebreaker question, which says, if you've got something that's seemingly important, if those criterion don't help you out, sometimes you really have to leverage the stakeholder, the executive sponsors.
Yeah, guidance. I like that a lot. All right, it's been a quick 30 minutes. We're already at time here, but wanted to give folks a final statement or a second here. Obviously, Pete, for your sake, either a final point on really the tips of the topic or anything else you'd like to sign off with.
Yeah, no, just thank everybody. This has been great. I will add one thing to where Amy was going. Are you ready to even execute or prioritize a project? If you can't answer the questions that Amy and Alex were talking about as an organization about a certain initiative or a project, it's not ready. And so that tells you to kind of go back to the drawing board and fill those things in. So be ready before you start a project and doom yourself to failure.
I love that. Is it feasible? That's a good one. Is it feasible? Is it values aligned? Can you afford to do it? And do you have the bandwidth? Alex, any final tips or anything else you'd like to sign off with here?
No, I just wanted to thank you for hosting us, and Pete and Amy, thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom here. And for all those watching, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Please send me a follow or a LinkedIn connection request, Alex Tuck, and also check out our website, tuckconsultinggroup.com.
Amazing. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone for your time. And if you're watching now or in the recording, feel free to leave a comment or a question there. We can always respond to it after or send out some additional responses here. Thanks for everyone's time. It's been a wonderful discussion and happy to see everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.